How's it going, you guys? Welcome back to another edition of the podcast. My name is Ramon. This is Dad's podcast project. And today I wanted to talk about accepting responsibility and teaching my son specifically about accepting responsibility for his actions. Now, before getting into that, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to subscribe, to listen to the podcast on iTunes, leaving your ratings, your comments, all of this stuff. It's very helpful to continue to grow and to continue to get these newer styles of podcasts out there. If you're also watching the video on YouTube, things are kind of coming together in pieces. Sort of working on things as I can, but it's all a part of the process, having video to go along with the audio. So again, thank you guys for taking that time. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump right into things. So accepting responsibility is probably, I would consider to be a pretty big lesson in a young child's life. They're going to learn things along the way, and one of these things, as I already said, was responsibility. So I want to give an example of what I mean, and it happened the past weekend when I was out with my wife and the two kids, and we decided to grab breakfast in the morning. So going out in public with kids can be a toss-up. You don't really know what you're going to get when you go out there. So, excuse me. If you have, say, a very active child, our son is a very active child. So when we go out in public, we don't know how he's going to act. He may act crazy in the sense of just being really hyperactive, wanting to touch everything, wanting to be loud, not wanting to do certain things, like, for example, going to breakfast. He may very well not have wanted to sit down and have breakfast right then and there. So that would have been a situation where, how do we approach this? Now, we went out to breakfast and we get there, we sit down, and everything's going great. He's eating his breakfast. We're having great time together. Even our daughter, we packed her some oatmeal cereal. She's having breakfast with us. All in all, great time. Well, at this restaurant, crayons come with the kids' menu. So they bring out the cup of crayons, and this has kind of been like how's this going to play out? Is he going to color with it? Is he going to break them? Is he going to throw them? You don't really know what to expect. Or we don't really know what to expect. He can do anything at this point. So fortunately, he was all about coloring, but near the end of our dinner, or the end of our breakfast, he decided to grab the crayon, and this all happened very quickly. Very quickly. So he grabs the crayon and then proceeds to color on the window of this restaurant. And right away, my wife, her eyes just get really big. Excuse me. I look over, I notice, and it's almost as if time kind of just slowed down in that moment. How am I going to react to this situation? Clearly, we're in public. I'm not about to make a scene. I don't want my son to make a scene, or to just lose control of the situation. And in that moment of, I guess, zen or clarity or whatever you want to call it, I decided to very quickly, very calmly, hug my son from, he was facing away from me. So I went to hug him, and I reached for the crayon, and I told him, "You need to stop. That is not okay. That is not okay." I repeated it twice. I then took the crayon from him, pointed to what he did on the glass, and told him, We do not color on the glass. This is not okay. And then it's like, we got to clean this up. So I reach for a napkin. We have like ice cubes. I'm trying to MacGyver, makeshift some ghetto cleaner, and it's not coming off. Now, I'm not going to just leave this. I'm not just going to pay our bill and just walk out, boom, crayon on the glass, like somebody else did that. So I tell my son, it's not coming off. You need to tell the man. And by man, I'm referring to our server who had come up and, he had taken our order and served us our food. And I told him, yes, you need to tell the man. And right away, my son puts his head down. He's just really kind of closing off. And I tell him, you need to tell him what you did. It is not okay. This is very naughty of you to have done this. And you need to tell him. So he gets down from the booth, and I pick him up so that he's at eye level with this gentleman, because I don't want him to have to, under his breath whisper and, look down at his shoes. I want him at eye level with this young man. And again, this guy, our server, he was a young kid, younger than myself. So who knows how that situation would have gone, but I mean, going into it. So I take him up to the young man and I tell my son, tell the man what you did. Is there something that you want to say? And never before have I seen my son acting just so, I don't know if it's embarrassed, guilty, whatever it was, just burying his head into my shoulder, not wanting to look. And I'm not trying to escalate the situation. I'm trying to be very calm and keep the conversation between those within the vicinity that can hear. I'm not trying to be loud and just make a huge scene to where everybody's over looking at me and my son. And the young man turns around. He's like, well, what happened? What went wrong? And my son clearly wasn't going to say anything. And I wasn't going to force him to say anything either. So I told him, my son took one of the crayons and he colored on the glass. And he said, oh, that's okay. We can clean it up. And it's not me. I didn't feel it was my place to impose, like, don't tell him that this is okay. Because in reality, as an adult, if we make a mistake, if I were to have dropped a plate in a restaurant and go up to the hostess and say, excuse me, if I were to go up to the hostess myself and say, I dropped this plate or I dropped this coffee mug, I made a mistake. I don't really expect them to chew me out, to tell me you're being naughty, to discipline me. I expect them to tell me, that's fine. We have replacement plates. I mean, so it was a completely justifiable response from him to my son. And I told my son, look at the man. Did you hear what he said? And so he looks up and he looks at him and the young man repeats, it's okay, we can clean it up. And I repeat that to my son. I told him, he said it's okay. He said they will clean it up. Now I want you to apologize to him for what you did. And my son, I'm so very sorry for taking the crayon onto the glass. And he told him it's okay. And I said, all right, that's it. That's the end of this lesson, really. There's nothing more that I could have thought to have done. Again, approaching it, I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't think making a scene was going to help the situation. I wasn't about to drag my son outside or anything of that nature. I felt that it was a really great opportunity to have him learn what it means to own up to your actions, what it means to be responsible. So again, it's just, I knew the reaction that I was going to get from the host or from our server. I knew that the crayon was clearly going to be able to come off, but the way with which I was doing it with a napkin and, dampening it with a little bit of ice was clearly not the way. You have to use some cleaner, some solvent to remove it, but kind of engaging the room, like, because other people, they noticed, and I kind of felt like I got a semi nod of approval from some of the elderly folks that were there, because I think as time goes on, things change with the way that we approach our children. Had it been me when I was a child, things might have panned out very differently. But that's the great thing about being a parent, is that you can take some of the ways that you may have been disciplined as a child and tweak it, because if that didn't work for you, chances are it's not going to work for your child. And I say that in the example of maybe if raising your voice, if you've been disciplined as a child yourself, by someone who raised their voice, or by someone who implemented things like spanking, and that didn't work for you, that may work for some children. I've spoke to other parents, and they've told me stories about they spanked their child one time, and that was like the last time. And the same went for them when they were growing up, that they were spanked once and that was the end of it. There was no more. Now, myself growing up, I was spanked more than once. I mean, I shouldn't say like more than once at one time. It was like there was more than one occasion where the discipline reached a point where spanking was implemented. And with all just complete transparency, that really didn't work for me. I was spanked on more than one occasion. And if other children learned the first time, but I didn't, then my son won't either. I don't bank on him being receptive to that level of discipline. So the approach that I've taken, and the approach that I continue to work on taking, is spending an extra amount of time talking, educating, working with, and listening to, more importantly, because he may not have the capacity at this time to express to me why he does some of the things that he does, but also I have to, as his father, take into account that a majority of these actions are going to be completely impulsive, not with any sense of ill intent, but just doing it just to do it. And that's where I try to educate. I try to take the time to talk to him and to let him know that this was either wrong and naughty, because coloring on the glass, no matter how you may feel it's expressing their artistic or their artistic ways, there's a time and a place for coloring, and it is not in public it is not on a piece of public glass. So that's socially considered graffiti. So I don't want to teach him that doing something illegal is okay. But I hope that with this, it was like a little lesson that you have to own up to what you did. That whenever you make a mistake at the house, yeah, things go a lot differently. But when it's in public, when it's someone else's property, or when it affects somebody else, you have to own up to it. You can't just lie about it or hide it or run away from it. And more often than not, you'll learn that owning up to your actions aren't going to yield the maybe negative disciplinary action or response that you might have thought it would have. And in this one, who knows what he may have thought would have happened. I mean, my son is 3. Has a vivid imagination. He may have thought that this man would have been so upset that he would have yelled at him. But that wasn't the case. And it was a great learning lesson for him that, when we make mistakes or when we do damage to other people's property, we still have to own up to that and accept the consequences. Now, within reason, of course. So that was one of the learning lessons that I had taken the time to try to implement. Again, it was last weekend. Made for an interesting, an interesting breakfast or end of a breakfast. But yeah, it's definitely an adventure. Parenting is something it's something new every day. There's never a dull moment. And I'll tell you, if you have a very active child yourself, then you know what I mean by they keep you on your toes all the time. There's never a moment of rest. So with that being said, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen to this podcast. Thank you for your continued support through the transitional phase from the photography podcast into this new sort of dialogue, this new dad's podcast project. I'm still working on still working on getting that name out smoothly, but till next time, you guys. See ya.